right, let's ask Gary's question real quick here. This is a good one. So if you're using a dialer software like the RedX, Mojo, Prospect Boss, any of those companies, Espresso Agent, but you're only using the one-line dialer instead of the multi-line dialer, is that defensible, or would you be more likely to be considered to be in compliance? Or do you actually have to physically use your cell phone and dial from your cell phone?
I think the spirit of the law is you physically have to type the numbers in and dial the number. But again, to your point, Michael, like the levels of risk increase the more you deviate from that. In my experience, being a business person around that, like, look, I'm a CEO of a tech company, right? So I think like you about the law. We spend a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this law. But there are practical realities around it. I'll repeat, talk to your attorney. Michael's not your attorney. But we're trying to educate you around this. So I think, yes, the spirit of the law is one or multi. Doesn't matter. It's still using regulated technology to make the call. But the reality is how discoverable, defensible, like the further you get away from typing, the more at risk you are. And I'm not sure that I would be worried personally if I were doing this myself about using a one-line dialer on that. But that's my tolerance for risk. To Michael's point earlier, everyone has a different tolerance for risk around this.
Yeah, I'm with you though. I think I've got a pretty high tolerance for risk for some of that kind of stuff, and honestly, I really feel like the agents that are willing to take on a little bit more risk with that are more likely to have more success, because others are going to crawl into a hole and be worried about, oh my gosh, COVID hit, I can't do business anymore, right? No, like you can still use Zoom. You can still, you got to find ways to be productive and succeed in this business. So
yeah, and just be smart about, like, understand the risk that you're taking. Like it doesn't have to stop you. Just use it as part of the calculation in your mind of like, what risk am I taking here? If I use a one-line dialer and someone figures out that I used a one-line dialer, or I have to, reveal that in court, maybe if you have to reveal it in court and you go to court, then there's some risk there that technically that is part of the law. But again, there's a lot between you using a one-line dialer and going into court and having to defend on all that stuff. So they're all just risk reward trade-offs that I think you need to think about and make in the industry. But a lot of that stuff will be legislated out too, Michael. There are so many nuances to this law. It's impossible. Like, the working group has not explored all of them, and they've certainly not been explicit about all of them. So a lot of the things that we talk about, that the attorneys talk about, that go on and talk, TCPA World talks about, are nuanced cases, in gray area that will be figured out by the courts.
Well, and I think Jeff Wheatley makes a good example, for those that are a little bit concerned about that. I'm on the Facebook feed here. He says, good business decisions might be to click to call more defensible than even a one-line dialer. I mean, again, it's click to call, right? So it's, again, to Matthew's point, getting you closer to the actual physically dialing the phone with yourself. Okay, so this is all awesome information. So let's back up. What are we missing from a legal standpoint, and what are we missing in this contextually?
So one thing that we haven't touched on, I want people to understand, again, with all the context that we've tried to provide, and Michael's, obviously, as he always does, provided some awesome business context to this, trying to get you educated. There's one piece of education that you need to know that we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about new leads. We've not talked about your existing database. Okay. Yep. There are already some rules related to consent that are out there, right? For using technology to contact your CRM database. These are getting more stringent, as we've talked about today, starting January 27th.
Mm-hmm. But now, hold on, we'll back up really quick, because we had heard a December 15th date. What I'm hearing you say is December 15th is no longer a factor. It's January 27th.
They changed it a little bit along the way over the course of the last year. So now it's January 27th. Let me check my notes. Yes, January 27th, to make sure I'm not misleading people. January 27th.
And that date requires what?
That date is when this new order goes into place that requires one-to-one consent, requires proving contextuality of marketing, and a few other things, as you've talked about AI in the disclosure language. So, but keep in mind that the wording in this is a little bit complex. And again, I'm going to give more props to the Troutman Amin group, who've done a lot of detailed analysis here. And I talked with them recently about this. this law applies not just to leads that you generate going forward. It also applies to how you contact your entire contact database that you already have. So it doesn't mean
including your sphere of influence. This is everybody.
Everything. So it doesn't mean that your CRM contacts are valueless that are in your database. However, there are things that you can't do in the spirit of this law on come January 27th that you could do today. If you had disclosures that were valid up until now, you cannot use automated technology, including automated SMS, text, automated dialers, any of that to your existing contact database come January 27th, unless you recapture disclosure and consent from those customers. Now, we're in a little bit of a time window here where you could reach out to them and gather new consent via automated technology. But once you get to January 27th, you cannot even use regulated automated technology to reach out to gather new consent because it's cart before horse, right? So, and that's been addressed very explicitly. Come January 27th, your existing contact database is treated just like any new lead that you gather. So again, doesn't impact if you human pick up the phone, type in a text, but it does impact the use of any of this technology for your existing customer database. So you need to.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So you need to just be diligent about, again, being informed. I had an accounting professor in B school that said being forewarned is forearmed. And that always stuck with me, right? And it's like, okay, you don't have to do all this, but realize you're taking a risk if you don't.
Club Wealth is the only coaching company on the planet that will literally guarantee that you will double your income or make at least an extra $100,000 your first year coaching with us, or we will give you 100% of your investment back. Click the link below, sign up for the appropriate tier level, and let's get you a strategy session today. And I promise you, I 100% guarantee you, promise you that you will walk away with a heart full of gratitude for the time that we took for you because you got so much value out of that call. Schedule your strategy session today. I promise you'll be glad you did.